Here tonight, and I'm happy to give a special welcome. We have people in simulcast as well. But before we get started, you know what I'm going to say. Make sure your phones are turned off. And I actually think it's finally safe to say that spring is here, right? Don't we think? And maybe it will stick around. Who knows? Yes, we all hope. I know I saw a number of you wandering around the gardens. The gardens are completely spectacular. I hope you've had a chance to see. We have thousands of tulips in bloom. The camellias are hanging on. The cherries still have a few blossoms. The forsythias and the azaleas are really starting to come on. So you need to come back over and over again, because this is it, you know. I mean, it continues, really the azaleas will continue throughout May, so please do come back and bring friends. And throughout the month of May, our fabulous horticultural team will have several different hands-on workshops, so you can consider joining us on May 5th to construct a beautiful hanging basket, and then on May 12th to build your own container garden, and on May 19th to plant your own herb garden. So I know you know information and tickets are available on the website. And there's another a lecture I want to draw to your attention, because I'm of course devastated that this is our last lecture of this series. It's been such a wonderful series. But on May 22nd, our new curator of costumes and textiles and accessories, Megan Campbell, is going to be giving a lecture on Dina Merrill. May 22nd is actually a year to the day when Dina died. So she died last year, May 22nd, 2017. And so we're opening a special, what we call mansion rotations, a special small show upstairs in the bedroom and so forth. And Megan's done a lot of wonderful research on Dina. And so I think she has a lot to bring to light about Dina Merrill that I think you'll all be interested in. And I know that I'm speaking to the choir, but of course you know when I get a microphone I have to exhort you to become a member if you're not already a member. You get discounts on all the public programs and workshops all throughout the year. So if you're not already a member, please join tonight. And it's now my pleasure to introduce our speaker. Cathy Barancik Graham is an award-winning artist and fashion illustrator. Her editorial work has appeared in the New York Times, Rolling Stone, New York Magazine, and her work has been commissioned by Bergdorf Goodman, Estee Lauder, CBS Records, and HBO. In addition, Cathy has been a contributing editor of Elle Decor and House Beautiful. She's a graduate of the Rhode Island School of Design, from which she holds a BFA in painting, and she studied fashion illustration at Parsons School of Design. Her first book, Second Bloom, came out in September. It's a beautiful look at creating intimate and welcoming events through floral design, and is, of course, available for sale in the museum shop. And Cathy would, of course, be delighted to sign copies following the lecture. Please join me in welcoming Cathy Graham.
It's probably going to be too tall. Thank you so much for coming tonight, and I'm just thrilled to be here. It's just exquisite here. I went to see the show, which is marvelous, and thank you, Mary, and thank you, Aaron. So I think the best way to get started is with a little bit of my backstory. I arrived upside down in the dead of winter in the middle of the country, Highland Park, Illinois, to be exact, sometime in the middle of the last century, to an artist mother and an architect father. I was a rather large baby, as you can see. I'm actually about the same size now. All right, one grandmother was a painter, another was an avid gardener and loved doing flower arrangements. So, as they say, the apple didn't fall far from the tree. Some of my childhood obsessions that show up in my work today are Barbie dolls, plastic dollhouse furniture, anything vintage, especially from the 1920s to 1940s. I want you to know this is true. Around the 3rd grade, I decided I didn't care for going to school anymore. This isn't once or twice, this is a lot. So I came up with various stomach ailments so I could stay home and draw fashion ladies with teeny tiny waists, watch 1930s movies, and fantasize of someday leading a glamorous life as a prima ballerina in New York City, married to Cary Grant. Now, I went on to study painting at the Rhode Island School of Design. When it came time to graduate, I had to decide whether I wanted to go to graduate school in painting or move to New York to be with my boyfriend, I swear it's his name, Hoke. So a friend suggested, since I love fashion, that maybe I should go to Parsons and study fashion illustration. As soon as I arrived in New York, my boyfriend informed me that he was in love with my best friend. They're still married today, many, many years later. Anyway, so here I am. I'm in a new city, heartbroken. So what do? I moved to the Barbizon Hotel for Women, just like in the 1930s movies I loved so much. Okay, since I'm heartbroken, I really focused on my studies. And then I embarked on a career as a freelance illustrator. And my very first job was for a Bloomingdale's catalog cover, followed by 4 pages in New York Magazine's year-end double issue. And it was the time of sort of punk and Studio 54, and I worked in pastel then. It was a bit wild and free, and my career took off. And I did work for Rolling Stone, that was Elvis Costello, Mademoiselle, that's Laurie Anderson for Rolling Stone, Elizabeth Arden, CBS. Oh, Japan. I was on a magazine cover in Japan. There I am in my loft. Okay, and loved doing flowers, of course. And here that was for Revlon. So there's little things, and there's for HBO. There's Boy George. So I was living in a beautiful loft downtown. I have to mention it was pink. And I was immersed in the downtown lifestyle. Eventually, I fell in love, got married, said goodbye to Soho, sold my loft, and moved uptown to the townhouse where I live today. Here, I felt like a fish out of water. I was unfamiliar with this new world. The man I married happened to be Catherine Graham's youngest son. This was a rather daunting experience for an extremely shy, slightly bohemian illustrator. Since I was so incredibly shy and intimidated by my mother-in-law, for years I never said a word. But while I was being quiet, I was very busy observing the ins and outs of the women who were considered the very best at this type of entertaining, such as Dita Blair, Evangeline Bruce, and Susan Mary Alsop, just to name a few. Dita is still a dear friend of mine today. Next slide. And there's one of her tables in Washington that she did. And I also have to mention that all these great hostesses I met all had one thing in common, and that was they were all very welcoming and very gracious to whoever came into their homes. So, for the first time in my life, I began hosting dinner parties on my own with varying degrees of success, or, to be perfectly honest, varying degrees of failure, and always doing my own flowers. Those early flowers. We had a weekend house in northwestern Connecticut where I had the most glorious cutting garden designed by the brilliant Nancy McCabe. That is where I fell in love with arranging flowers straight from the garden. I grew roses, tulips, delphinium, phlox, cosmos, African sunflowers, and my favorite, dahlias. Around this time, I met Robert Isabel, the greatest florist, party planner this past century has ever seen. I hired him to do a big party at my house. When he came over, I asked if he had any suggestions on how I could get better at arranging flowers. He said, so when I asked when, he said, come work for me. I asked when. He said, tomorrow. And that was the beginning of a great friendship. I was able to work on wonderful weddings, such as, these are Robert's, I didn't work on that actual one, but wonderful weddings. And one of the favorite ones that I worked on was for Marie Chantal and Prince Pavlos of Greece. I went over to England with Robert for 8 days. There's only one picture. We're going to get to it. That's Robert's thing, but this is not Marie Chantal's wedding. All right, this is the only picture I have. This is just to give you an idea of how many roses were there. And what was incredible is having to condition, I wasn't the only one conditioning all the roses, but they came from South America, and the boxes were just filled with bugs. And I remember just being covered from head to toe with little bugs crawling over me. And I still have nightmares to this day. But the wedding was magnificent. It really was. And I loved being a fly on the wall. Anyway, another thing I loved, being a bit of a snoop, would be going to clients' grand houses and apartments through the back door and do their flowers. Sometimes they were friends of my mother-in-law. It was great fun. But the most important thing that Robert gave me was the confidence to express myself through flowers. When my 2 children, Juliet and Tommy, came along, I put my creative energy towards doing children's birthday parties, holidays, handmade invitation, and lots of entertaining. And of course, lots of flowers. About 2.5 years ago, my life as I knew it came to a sudden halt. After 30 years of marriage, my husband announced he wanted a divorce. I was devastated. I felt abandoned, frightened. The protective bubble burst. I was 61 years old, and I was determined not to become bitter, angry, or resentful. I was simply too old for that. I had to move forward. So what I did is what I knew best. I picked up my pencils and drew every day, even at night, often from the bed. That's why some of these are called bed drawings. Oh, I have to mention, this is what dating is like online these days. That's Match.com. I will tell you a little bit about my boyfriend. He comes with very little baggage. He doesn't talk too much, and he never uses the bathroom. Okay, so drawing became a form of therapy. Slowly, I reconnected to who I was before I got married. Anyway, I felt it was really important to stay social. So I started giving dinner parties regularly on my own. It was a bit scary at first. Well, those are my boyfriend's friends. But gradually I felt empowered, since I no longer had a husband to embarrass with my outlandish tablescapes. One day, my dear friend Joanna Coles suggested I start posting on Instagram. So I started posting a drawing a day. It was whatever I felt like drawing that day. Anyway, one thing led to another, and I got a book deal with Vendome Press. As we all know, going through a divorce is painful. But for me, it was the most wonderful thing to have this project of doing a book. And the book starts in spring, which means rebirth, renewal, awakening, new hope, hence second bloom. We start in spring, as I said, and here I will show you some of my table settings incorporating dollhouse furniture, vintage knickknacks, anything that includes a bit of whimsy and the unexpected. Using clear nylon thread, I hung the wonderful passion flower from the ceiling, but I also hang Barbie clothes, miniature kitchen utensils, crystals, glitter stars. Turns out to be a great conversation starter. You can always turn to the person next to you and say, "Our hostess is insane." Summer, I love the summer. Oh, these are some of my, I was talking about, all right, so here we have a ranunculus wearing a Barbie outfit. And I don't know why, I thought it'd be funny to put Google eyes on that lovely, lovely peony there. And why not dress, so this is a new thing, dress your flowers. And next slide. And here you can see, I figure if I make the table look pretty enough, I can get away with this. So I just sort of tear up little sparkly pieces of fabric. There's a bulb hanging, a Barbie dress. I don't know why I find medical things so funny, but there's boric acid. And just, so it's a little bit of unexpected. That's my favorite steak. And, all right, both my grandparents, my mother's parents, they both wore dentures, and I spent a lot of time with them. And they would put their dentures in water every night, and I thought it was fascinating. So that's a little homage to them. So I collect all these things on eBay. And this is to show you that sometimes I can actually just do a normal-looking table. So, summertime. I love summer. This is this was my house in Nantucket. And I begin early in the morning, filling my basket with freshly cut flowers. I take them into the house, and by the way, I just have to mention, my roses do wonderfully in the sea air. So this I did for the kids when they were little. I always thought it'd be so great to have a playhouse. So this is a playhouse, and inside it's a big art studio for them to play around with. Anyway, so here I am in the flower room, conditioning my flowers. I bring the flowers into the house, and I'll tell you a little bit about how I condition flowers. There are many books on conditioning flowers that go into depth, but I'll cover some basics. The most important thing to remember is that your flower needs moisture to prolong its life, and that the bacteria will kill your flowers sooner. So conditioning the flowers to get over the shock of being cut from the garden, I cut the stem at an angle about 2.5 inches from where I cut it, and I plunge them into warm water, and I let them sit. And I always cut the leaves off below the water line because the leaves will cause bacteria. And if you want, you can add a little bit of bleach to help the bacteria from growing, keeping the flowers fresh and the water clear and odorless. But if you're like me and you have pets, cats for me at the moment, skip this step. I do not want to lose any of my pets to drinking water from the vase, which they love to do. All right, so be sure to change the water every day. And while it may seem like a chore, you'll be surprised how much longer your flowers will last when you keep the water clean and clear. Another tip is if you have a small arrangement, you can put them straight in the fridge and then take them out. You can put them out in at night and take them out in the morning. This can really help them last a long time. I like to have the flowers sit for at least 1 or 2 hours before I begin arranging. Now, I'll tell you about, this is just an arrangement I did with the fresh flowers from the garden. All right, so now I'm going to tell you how I go about creating my little garden tabletops. I start with my collection of vintage bottles that I buy mostly on eBay, using different sizes from tall to minuscule. Each holds their own flower, and I keep adding them to the table. And here's an example of me doing a table. I'm adding the flowers, and at some point, I feel I better stop so there's room for the plates. No two tables are ever the same. One can add flowers daily, replacing the wilting ones. What makes it fun is it's always changing and evolving. I'm partial to clear glass, but I also love pale blues, greens, lavender. Regardless of the color, I like to use a soft color for the vases, which allows the flowers to be the star of the show. When it comes to choosing a tablecloth, I stick with solid colors or simple patterns such as checks or stripes. When I do use a floral tablecloth, I try to keep the color of the flowers very much like the colors in the tablecloth, so it won't be too much. And it still has a calm, I love to have sort of very calm environments. Maybe you can see why, because I'm a little jumpy. Anyway, the possibilities are endless, and you can have great fun creating your own miniature garden on the table. Even if it's a Sunday afternoon and the only flowers you can find are a bunch of white daisies, you'll be surprised at how charming they can look if each stem is in its own little bottle. I trim them usually 2/3 to 1/3 the height of the bottle. Another very easy tabletop that I like to do, which is so simple, is just using fruit. Here, I don't like to mix the fruit, so each type of fruit gets its own bowl. Again, like the vases we just saw, I vary the sizes of the bowls. What makes these bowls special is simply adding lemon leaves, which you can buy at a local florist for about $10. And if you can't find lemon leaves, buy something similar. There just are no rules. I use something green. If it be just something you find in the garden, you cut a leaf, just use that. Not only does the fruit make a lovely tabletop, you can also serve it as dessert. With clementines, pears, apples. Anyway, there's a little check, you see. And next slide. All right, here we come to autumn. I live in New York City, and there's the most wonderful market on Union Square. So in the fall, I find wonderful zinnias, my absolute favorite dahlias, especially the big dinner plate variety. Yes, they are actually the size of a dinner plate. Once, I was so inspired by the vegetables that were available in the market, I decided to create a tablecloth using fresh vegetables to make a design. To do a practice run, I went back to my studio. Using an old sheet, I started to play with creating a pattern. Using glue dots and wax paper cutouts under any beet or vegetable that might stain. Some vegetables I kept whole, while others I began chopping up. Okra turns out to be, when you slice it, a pretty little flower, and it's about a coin size, and I just used a toothpick to remove the seeds. I love arranging radishes, sweet peas, chives, nasturtium leaves, rosemaries, and little miniature eggplants. And my absolute favorite are candy striped beets and watermelon beets. Once I began getting the idea of what I could do, I moved outside and created this tablecloth for a luncheon in my garden. It just lasts for the luncheon, and you probably don't want to eat it afterwards, unless maybe you could just put salad dressing on it and see what happens. So in the fall, I love doing crazy, wild, big arrangements. I'm very much influenced by the great florist Constance Spry, using herbs, curly willows, grasses, vegetables, fruit, mixing it all into a big fall explosion. Another party I did, I was able to use my collection of countertop mannequins from the 1940s and 50s. This was the perfect vehicle for a cocktail party I gave my dear friend, William Ivy Long, the spectacular Tony Award-winning costume designer. William recreated these miniature versions of his most iconic costumes from some of his beloved shows, such as Hairspray, The Producers, Nine, Cinderella. It was great fun collaborating. There's William doing one of the costumes in his studio. And it was just glorious. And here I'll just tell you a little about this. So there you see it. There's my mantle in the living room. And I decided to do a garland. And if you look closely, you'll see radishes, beets, and turnips. And I wanted to keep the color palette very mauve and soft and nothing too bright, so the costume would shine. There I am with William, who's divine, who was just a dear, dear friend, and he was so good to me going through a difficult time. He had just had a wonderful article in Vanity Fair come out, so this was a celebration of that. Now we come to winter, holiday time. means embellished cards, hand-painted candle shades, and rather than using the traditional red and green, I thought I'd use turquoise and hot pink. Here, I take out all my crazy old vintage toys and pretty much anything that glitters. Yes, as you can see, Ken enjoys wearing faux fur in the chilly winter months. After the holidays, I am ready to say goodbye to the short days, all the snow and sleet and slush. But even in the dismal February day in New York, it's springtime on 28th Street in the flower market. I start filling my home with spring flowers to lift my spirits until the real spring arrives a few months, or it seems like a few years later. Okay, giving a dinner party. Oh, there's this little spring. So giving a dinner party is like putting on a show. There will be hits and flops, but the show must go on. So I start with a handmade invitation to set the mood, followed by a collage reminder card using my vintage scrapbooks. And I actually go to the dollhouse store and get little miniature food and put them on the reminder cards too. And then, since not everybody opens their mail, I send out my version of an e-invite. Anyway, I'm going to wrap up with a few of my entertaining tips. As I tell you about these tips, some just examples of various tabletops I'll show you. Okay, number 1. And I get really nervous before a dinner party, just like I got a little nervous before I spoke here today. So don't get drunk before the guests arrive. Put the lampshade on after dinner. 2, as for the number of guests, my favorite number is 8. It's just the right number for a round table, and it makes it easy for everyone to join in the conversation. But I usually do 20 people. Okay, don't panic if people drop out at the last minute. It happens all the time. It used to freak me out. But now, so what? It's just a dinner party. Just take away a place setting and move on. I don't like doing any more than 45 minutes for cocktails. I don't serve too much food during cocktails. I like to do teeny tiny bite-sized hors d'oeuvres. The smaller, the better. You want people to remain a little bit hungry for dinner. Circulate during cocktails and make sure everyone is introduced to one another. That is easier said than done, but at least I attempt. Okay, I use place cards, and I never sit spouses together. Meeting new people and mixing it up is what makes a dinner party memorable. It's okay if the ratio of men to women is uneven. Frankly, sitting next to another woman generally means the conversation, will be more interesting and fun. Outdated rules are meant to be broken. If someone is running over an hour late, just sit down without them. When they do show up, pull up a chair. Keep your phone near in case someone forgets the address or there's an emergency with the babysitter, or who knows what. Soft lighting is a must. Candlelight is the best. You want to see the food, but I don't want to see the wrinkles. All right, always have a vegetarian alternative dish ready. In the event that someone has dietary restrictions and has an issue with what you might be serving. It seems like everyone has an allergy lately. So whether it's gluten, shellfish, meat, it's best to have a vegetable plate ready. Once the main course is over and dessert is about to begin, I think it's fine to suggest that you grab your wine glass and move to another seat. This gives people a chance to spend time with new friends and re-energize the conversation. If you have a new friend at the party, I think it's nice to introduce them to everyone at the table, describing how you met and touching on a few interesting and amusing tidbits about them. It helps break the ice and encourages new people into the fold. Hopefully, I've given you an idea or two to try out the next time you're having people over. Or the next time you're tempted to buy a bouquet at the grocery store. Today, this unexpected change that I experienced released a wave of creativity, and I discovered that my life has opened up to exciting new possibilities. And as the old saying goes, every dark cloud has a silver lining. Mine happened to be filled with flowers and glitter. I've started a business, Second Bloom. I've been designing textiles for Charmastity Linens. I'm also collaborating with Scott Potter on a line of decoupage items for the home, as well as a Second Bloom candle that I did with Nest Fragrances. As my late friend, the screenwriter J. Preston Allen said, and I never quite knew what she meant either, you never don't know. How right she was. So now, I thank you, and I'd like to open this up for questions. Yes?
So you mentioned that you find some of your little glass vases on eBay. Where do you find your vintage toys and the other items that you collect?
On eBay. I do more shopping late at night, in bed, at home. I mean, it's so much fun. I mean, I love going to flea markets and antique stores, but I really love eBay. And Esty. Any other questions? Yes?
I have a question about some of the big arrangements.
Yes.
When you have them, do you have a rule of thumb then for height? And, you know, sometimes if I've done, you know, something and then you can't see the, you know.
Cathy, can you repeat that question for
Oh,
me?
yes. She just asked if there's a rule about the height, you know, when I'm doing these larger arrangements, and can you see the guests? And that is something that I've learned the hard way, because sometimes I get so excited doing the flowers, they get a bit too high, and I'm really short. So it is good for a dinner party to keep them, you know, you test it out and just sit across and see how if you can see somebody. But when I do my little garden tabletops, because they're single stems, they're various sizes, I can actually go taller because you can see through them. So yes?
Do you have a trick for cleaning the small little bottles after you've used them?
I get a little bottle brush.
Repeat the question.
Oh, all right. To keep the little tiny vases that I use clean and clear, it's not easy because you get this little green around it, but you can get tiny little bottle brushes And even like things that you use for your teeth, you can use that, and you can do a little scrub and put a tiny bit of bleach in, and it should clear it all up. Yes?
Is there any food at these dinner parties?
Oh my God, I'm so happy you asked that question. You'd be surprised because I'm so interested in flowers. I've never taken that great interest in food, but I try to serve good food. I haven't the slightest idea what to do in the kitchen, so I bring in a caterer. And yes, I do serve food. I try to have it be seasonal. And like I said, I try to have a vegetarian plate out there. But as you see, there's no food in the book. Yes, is there? Well, any other questions? Yes, okay.
You said to change the water every day in the flower. Should you clip the end of the flower?
I do. It's really great. And if you have a big arrangement and it's in water, you can just kind of grab it and pick it up, and then I just take a clipper and I just give everything a fresh clip, add an angle, and put it in the fresh water.
Every day?
I don't do that every day. I clip maybe every 2 or 3 days, but I change the water every day. Unless you put bleach and you don't have cats who drink the water. Yes?
I love the prints in the book that said the names of the seasons. Are any of those available to purchase? You know, you have the tables and the lamps, but the prints themselves are so beautiful too.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to hear that. I mean, I've done some cards and things. I haven't done anything with my little autumn, spring, but they might make nice placemats.
Or a calendar.
Oh, I'd be delighted. I am so open to doing these new things because this really did just happen 2.5 years ago. So I'm just starting my career again. And there were many, many years where very dormant. Yes?
Do you like to use a floral knife more?
When I worked at Robert Isabel, I used a floral knife. Since I really am tired of bloody hands, I use a clipper. If you want a really sharp stem and you really want a good cut, it's great to use a knife, but I'm too klutzy. Sorry. So.
Cathy, I've got a question from the simulcast.
Oh, great.
What do you use to hold the flowers in your vases together?
Okay, there are a few techniques you can do. One is when you're putting, if let's say you have a clear vase, you kind of go from one direction to another direction to another direction until you kind of get this cross thing going. And then you can start sticking flowers in the middle. Now, I also use Floral Foam, which a lot of people don't approve of these days, but I love it and feel I can really control the flowers. They don't last as long, but it's fun to do. The other method is chicken wire, where you take chicken wire, you should use 1-inch gauge, and you wrap it around and you put it in the container, and then that sort of holds the flowers. So. Oh, yes?
What do you do, and it's the same question that applies at some of the arrangements here at Hillwood. When you have the big ones, you know, the stems aren't necessarily that long, so how do you make these big arrangements?
Well, if you don't have a long stem, you get a stick, like a bamboo stick. And then with the bamboo stick, you get these little vials that have a rubber top. And you take floral tape, you tape it to the stick, you put the flower in the vial, and then you kind of cover it up with something. You can either use the floral tape so it's green, and then you put something in front of it. And I do that all the time with my big arrangements, because you're not really going to get a tulip that big.
Right.
So.
I have another one from the simulcast.
Yes?
How would you structure a summer garland?
Oh, how great. I've done many garlands, but they always seem to be in the fall and winter. So I guess if I did a summer garland, I use boxwood as a base because it's a really good base and it lasts a long time and it's a wonderful green. And then, again, I use little vials and I stick flowers all throughout. So you could just go in the garden, whatever. There's so many wonderful roses and delphiniums. You can cut a bit of them and just do a garland that way. I've never done a summer wedding because I'm an amateur florist, so I don't really, but they're done all the time. Yes?
What was your technique for making the garland around your mirror where you used the radishes and the flowers?
That one I had to have somebody help me because I used for the base was willow. That was actual willow. It was a willow branch that went around. And then from there, I had boxwood and I had ivy, and then I just kept adding things to it. Thank you so much. Yes?
I have a helpful hint for you.
Oh, good. I could use that. Tell me.
Your old bottles that have the film in them, I'm really
Yes.
take pollen for any falls.
Oh, great. I already have some. That's wonderful. Perfect.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Up to the mark, put water in and let them soak overnight.
What a great idea. I don't know if everybody heard, but, you know, denture powder to keep your vases clean and clear, and you leave it overnight. And then you can use it to keep your teeth in, too. Yes?
More from the simulcast. Can you speak more about flower food? What food for which flowers?
Well, I don't really use flower food, but each flower is conditioned sometimes in a different way. If you have a sappy stem or a wooden stem. But as for flower food, they're wonderful little packets you can get. I just don't do that. I just keep the water clear. And again, I'm always so worried about my cats, you know, drinking the water. And also lilies. Lilies are horrible for pets. And so I have this spray that I put on that I make using, this is my kitchen skills, red hot chili peppers and all these things so the cats won't go near it. My eyes water when I go near the lilies, though. Anyway, yes?
At the end of your presentation, there were some vases that you had flowers on, and where are the, can you find these?
Oh, let's go back to the slide and I can show you.
Yes.
Can we go back to the vases? Not those, you mean, which ones do you mean? Keep going. Can you go to the glass vases, please? Just going backwards. Somewhere we're going to get them, and I can tell you about where I get them.
You mean the ones you...
Yeah, it's just the bottles. Just the bottles.
No, the vases that you showed there that had the flowers, I'm just wondering where they're available in
Okay.
your items.
Well, you meant that?
Yeah.
Oh, I did that. That's the decoupage items that I do with Scott Potter. Those can be purchased on my website, Cathy B. Graham, or on Scott Potter's website. But thank you so much for asking. I was going to keep I thought you meant the bottle, the clear ones. But oh, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Yes?
So during the cocktail 45 minutes versus cocktail
Yes.
hour, do you ever do sort of signature cocktails that you might garnish or incorporate flowers or greenery or anything into?
No, but I do love to serve like a fun cocktail. If it be a margarita, or which is my favorite, or, you know, Cosmos or martinis, or just, it's fun to have a drink. But I don't really do flowers on the trays, but it's sometimes pretty to put herbs. Love using rosemary and sage, and I'll sort of cover a basket around the edges with that. So, anyway, if that's it, I just want to thank you so much for coming, and to thank the people at Hillwood for having me. So, thank you.